stuff, so I think we're okay. So I'm going to go first because I think I have the less technical stuff to cover. Let me share my screen. And so one of the basic issues we have, and I know Emil is going to talk much more in detail about the number of protected wildlife species on this property, on the parcel, as well as the portion of the parcel where the buildings will be constructed that they consider where they're extending sewer service area to. Now, there are 6 species that are identified to be impacted in the 2016 Ecol Services Habitat Impact Assessment Report, which is the applicant's habitat specialist and engineer. And they recognize the bog turtle, the Indiana bat, the long-eared bat, the bobcat, and the wood turtle. An additional 8 species, the barred owl, the veery, the brown thrasher, the wood thrush, the Jefferson salamander, the Harris checker spot, bald eagle, and the great blue heron are identified by either the Highlands Council or DEP's landscape project, special species-based habitat database, but are not accounted for at all in the habitat assessment or the habitat restoration plan. So they don't address these 8 additional species. The project sits in an unusually high concentration of ranked 2, 3, 4, and 5 state and federally protected wildlife species throughout the proposed new sewer service area and the remainder of the parcel as well. The applicant intends to mitigate for unavoidable impacts, including the actual loss of habitat. But that's not okay. 1 or 2 species, maybe that you weren't able to avoid, but 6 that you've identified and an additional 8 you don't even discuss. The extent that the proposed new sewer service area is habitat for 14 protected species, it should not qualify for sewer service. It should be
Elliot.
Noted, yeah.
Elliot, let me ask you, for some reason I didn't hear you mention long-tailed salamander. So I know for a fact that there's long-tailed salamander just upstream from the property boundary. So either the Highlands Council or the DEP landscape maps or somehow it's in the database.
You're
I don't know why.
You know, it was just, I don't know why I didn't mention it too. You're absolutely correct. I did see it. They do address it, but they mitigate for it. And so it's not.
Oh, so is long-tailed salamander one of the species in the Ecol Sciences document then?
Yes. So it's not habitat for 14 protected species, it's 15. I should have included long-tailed salamander. Thank you, Emil.
Okay.
It should be noted that the extensive mitigation proposed could not have been even considered under the WQMP rules prior to 2016, when they were weakened under Governor Christie. And as I mentioned, a priority environmental policy recommendation of Governor Murphy's transition team is to reverse those rollbacks to water quality regulations, including WQMP regulations. So another reason why it's important that the public comments. About half of the Millie's Court, 71.5 acres, is within the Ogdensburg Meadow Natural Heritage Priority Site. Now, these are places of very high ecological significance throughout the state that the Natural Heritage Program at DEP has identified as priority for acquisition because of their very high ecological values and for being habitat for rare plant species. This particular Natural Heritage Priority Site, the Ogdensburg Meadow Natural Heritage Priority Site, has a B1 V1 rating, the highest for ecological values of all of them. Only 3% of natural heritage priority sites in the state score this highly. The actual dwelling units, which is the area of the new sewer service area, is outside the boundary of the natural heritage priority site. Yet in the natural heritage program's boundary justification for its states, quote, more detailed hydrological investigations may justify extending the boundary, suggesting that the disturbances of construction within the proposed new sewer service area may in fact impact the globally critically imperiled wetland ecological community and the concentration of state critically imperiled rare plant species.
Hey, Elliot?
Yep.
Let me just add to that, that what we're talking about right now is this, if I remember right, the Ogdensburg Fen stops right now in the DEP mapping at the power line.
Correct.
But it's contiguous and doesn't look very different. So it's not like there's any kind of significant difference between the mapped and unmapped portions of this wetland system.
And that's perhaps why the Natural Heritage Program is recommending that they redo the boundary to include that. The Highlands Council has determined that the subwatershed in which the Millie's Court development is proposed is in a deficit of 754,000 gallons per day. This is the same subwatershed in which Franklin Borough's municipal wells are located. Millie's Court proposes to draw from these wells for its water supply and convey the wastewater to the Sussex County Upper Wallkill Water Pollution Control Facility, which is in a different subwatershed, meaning that that wastewater doesn't get returned to the ground to replenish this aquifer, resulting in a 100% depletive draw on the municipal water supply. A recent hydrological investigation contracted by the borough cautions that there may not be enough water for existing users, never mind with the addition of Millie's Court. This report by All Associates finds that all three wells are operating at a higher than sustainable pumping capacity, and they recommend pumping at a reduced rate to extend the life of the wells. They also recommend replacing the wells. This is an unsustainable situation right now without Millie's Court. As a condition of Executive Order 114 from 2008, this is from a governor's executive order, for a project in the Highlands Protection Zone, which Millie's Court is, if the subwatershed is in a deficit, which this subwatershed is, DEP may not approve an amendment to a water quality management plan unless a water use and conservation management plan consistent with the policies of the Highlands Regional Master Plan is fully implemented. And that's the term they use, fully implemented. That plan right now is still being drafted. It's not available. Never mind fully implemented. This amendment cannot be approved until a water use and conservation management plan is completed, available for public inspection, and fully implemented. The portion of the property where the units will be constructed is entirely within the Tier 1 and Tier 2 wellhead protection area for the borough of the boroughs of Franklin's municipal wells. Further, the entire parcel is underlain by carbonate rock, which provides little or no attenuation of contaminants in the event of a spill or due to contaminated stormwater. Any polluted stormwater, any pollutants that end up on the surface of the ground within the location of this development can easily get into the municipal water supply. They are not respecting their source water protection requirements because of their proximity to their municipal wells.
Hey, Elliot?
Yeah, Mark.
One of the things that went along with the Yule report is source water protection plan.
Yep.
And in that plan, they specifically indicated that development in Tier 1 areas is not desirable, and that they were pleased to see that it was mostly forested in the area around the township's wells. So this project's even in conflict with the municipality's own consultant as it relates to source water protection.
Correct. Well, that's the end of my presentation. I guess Mark and Emil get to duke it out. Who would like to go next? And if you have questions, wait until the end. We'll get to all of you.
Emil, why don't you go?
Okay. I'm going to share my screen. I have to be enabled, Elliot.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, Emil.
There we go. Give me a second here. Sorry, everybody. Okay, so can everybody see this aerial photograph?
Yes.
Okay, so here's today. So here's the illegal road. This road was built illegally, we believe, with no permits to put fill in a wetland and make a road crossing after the Wetlands Act was passed in the late 1980s. We believe the road was built a couple of years after that, sometime around 1991 or so. And it was built illegally in order to get a road down to these wells. Now, that's not to say that the town might have been able to get a permit to do that. It might have been difficult, but for a public purpose, such as, wells, the town might have been able to get a permit to build a road for a compelling public need. But they didn't, and it's illegal. And this development is certainly not a compelling public need, not what's proposed at least. So now there's a large ponded area because, as someone said earlier, the beavers have stopped up the culvert to some degree that goes under the road. That didn't happen right away. Here's a picture from, say, let's look at a picture from, say, 1995. The road was, quite new at the time. You can see how bright white it looks. But the water still flowed pretty much unabated under the road. But at some point, that culvert stopped functioning so nicely and the water started to pond. So if we advance through time, here you can see by 2013, the water was ponding. And so it's been a pond for at least about 10 years or so. So it's really important to note that bog turtles, there are 3 threatened and endangered species that are known from the immediate area and right on the property or right just upstream from it in this area. Bog turtles are known from the entire area. Wood turtles are known from the entire area, and long-tailed salamander. So I'm just going to quickly, you don't need to go look for these things. There's no point. They're already known from there. I just want to give you a feeling for what they look like for just a moment. So here's a picture of a bog turtle. They're very small. They're only about maybe 4 or 5 inches from head to tail. And here's a picture of, let's see. Here's a picture of a long-tailed salamander. They can be pretty long. The tail is very long. By the time you stretch them out, they might be as much as 9 to 11 inches long, including the whole tail. And they're threatened species. The bog turtle is federally listed, which means it has to get special review from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. That's the bog turtle. And that's the one that's really the most important one here, because that's a federally listed species. The wood turtle and here's the long-tailed salamander again, and the wood turtle. I don't have a close-up handy of a wood turtle, but here's the conservation status is threatened in New Jersey, and here's a picture of one. They're quite large. They can be, it probably says right here, they can probably be almost 10-inch. Adult wood turtles measure 5.5 to 8 inches in length. They can probably even be a little bit bigger than that, but they're a pretty big turtle. And you can see that they're all over northern and western New Jersey, north of the Pine Barrens. So there's a page like this on the Conserve Wildlife Foundation of New Jersey site for all of these species, so that you could, investigate them further: wood turtle, bog turtle, and long-tailed salamander. Those are the 3 that have an endangered and threatened status. Elliot mentioned that there's 15 species here. And some of the other ones have an endangered and threatened status, like the bats and the bobcat, but those species never stop anything, because it's almost impossible to ever find the exact spot that they need in terms of critical habitat. They have gigantic home ranges. And so, the argument always is that, well, this one little development won't hurt anything. And that's the argument that the developer's consultant is using. Let me go back to let me go back here so you can see me for a minute. Turn on my camera. So the developer, has a consultant, and this particular consultant pretty much never finds that any development hurts anything. It's pretty much what they do, is they always say that everything's going to be fine. And so when it comes to these 3 threatened and endangered species, the consultant is proposing mitigation. And like Elliot said, they shouldn't even be allowed to propose mitigation, but the rules have been relaxed. But they're proposing mitigation based on absolutely no data, right? They haven't done a study. They haven't tried to find bog turtles. They haven't radio tracked bog turtles. They don't know what part of the habitat the bog turtles are using. The bog turtles have adjusted to this change in hydrology because of the beaver dam. So let's go back to the aerial photograph. Right, as this place got wetter because of the beavers, they changed the water levels here. So particular locations where the bog turtles would have hibernated or laid their eggs 30 years ago are different now. And we don't know where those locations are. And we have no idea, since no one's done any radio tracking or any studies. You really need to do it for about 2 years. We don't know the current state of what these animals are doing. And to propose some sort of a mitigation project for them when you don't even know what they're doing is completely ridiculous. And that's the main point that needs to be made, is that there's no data, right? For the 3 species, the 2 turtles and the 1 salamander, there is no data. They don't know where the critical habitat is. As we zoom in, no one knows what little special spots in all of this habitat There it is in 2013. Here it is here it is now. Right, we'll zoom into a more recent photograph. No one knows what the absolute most critical spots are for these turtles, and they're proposing to.
Your photos aren't up. You need to share your screen.
Oh, rats! Didn't share my screen. Oh, okay. Share screen. Okay, share. You saw the pictures of the animals, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Then I went back to, for some reason, so that I could talk. Okay, so now let me go back to the, how about that? Can you see that now?
Perfect.
So no one knows. Wood turtles don't just stay around the stream. They lay their eggs right along the edge of the water and in the stream corridor. They hibernate in the stream corridor, but they forage up on the hillsides in the upland forest. Excuse me, bog turtles have a very restricted range. You know, they're going to stay pretty much in the wetlands. They might traverse over the dry ground to get from one spot to another. You know, but the bog turtles that live here are probably not climbing up and over the ridge and going into the wetlands of the Wallkill River, but they might go around, right? Over time, what they'll do is they'll wander up the stream corridor, and then they might hook up into the Wallkill River over here where the wetlands are close together. So, you know, if they're going to cross over uplands, they're going to find narrow places to do it. So all of this needs to be understood before they blow away the hillside. Here's the hillside, right, that they want to blow away and put houses on and pollute the water, which is also going to diminish this habitat. So, and then the long-tailed salamander, the same thing. There are, along the edge of the wetlands, there are springs and seeps. The water goes through the limestone rock and then percolates out of the hillside and into the stream corridor. And those long-tailed salamanders depend on those tiny little springs and seeps where the water is bubbling up out of the edge of the hillside and entering the stream corridor. And no one's done any studies. So we have 3 species that occupy the area. They're known to occupy the area. We know nothing about what habitats are critical and about their movements. And we have a biological consulting company that says, don't worry, they're going to be fine because we're going to mitigate. And they have no idea what they're talking about, right? They have no justification for their mitigation. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service tends to just go along with consultants because they don't like to make waves and approve these mitigation plans. And what we have to do is demand that they do 2 years of radio telemetry and mark individuals and put up drift fences. Drift fences are, you dig a trench and you put up some sheets of plastic or a hardware cloth, which is a metallic cloth. And then the animals hit that and then have to walk along and go into little traps. And then you can mark them and put radio transmitters on the turtles, and you can mark the salamanders. And then you can follow them around and learn what their habitat needs are and exactly what portions of the site are most critical. Without doing that, you can't develop a mitigation plan. It's impossible. It's biologically impossible. The consultants do it all the time because they get the government lets them get away with it. But we have to assert ourselves and tell the government that their plans are baseless and without merit. So, so those are the 3 species that we have to focus on. All the other species that are there are important, but it's much easier for the government to wave their arms and say, well, these species have big ranges and like a bobcat, you know, it roams all over the place, dozens, if not hundreds of square miles. One little tiny development, you know, is not going to get in the bobcat's way. The same thing of the bats. You know, they fly all over the place. They have big home ranges. One little development is not going to hurt the bats. And so these species are declining because we keep using up all their habitat and converting it to non-habitat. But every single tiny little piece, no one can make a justification as to, you know, what's the impact of that tiny little piece of lost habitat. But for the 2 turtles and the salamanders, which do not, you know, they don't roam very far. They have very critical needs in the exact location that we're talking about. And they can't get away with just waving their arms and saying that they're going to do a mitigation project and that the turtles and the salamanders are going to be all right. So we have to hold their feet to the fire. Let me just And the other thing is, if you're going to talk about animals and you're a layperson, don't talk about deer. Don't talk about foxes. Don't talk about, the birds and the wildlife and all the things we see out there. None of those are protected. Okay. It doesn't matter. Only talk about the threatened and endangered species, and then mention the other 12 species that Elliot's talking about that are either special concern or threatened, but have bigger home ranges. Please do not talk about common species. If you talk about common species, it makes you sound like you don't know what you're talking about. If you say, I love the deer, don't say that, okay? Because then everything else you say will be dismissed. All right, I hope everyone understands that. You cannot talk about common species because they don't matter. They're not protected in any way, shape, or form. And if you talk about them, it makes you sound like you're just, spouting off. Okay, so that's really important. Let me just say a couple of more things. I just want to, I guess I can share this for the details. Give me just a moment here. Go back to my email. Don't mind my desktop. So here's a paragraph that I've sent to Elliot, and I'm going to ask Elliot to share it with all the participants tonight, right? It's sort of a summation of what I just said about the 3 species, okay? Stick to that. Don't wander away and talk about things that you don't know about. It's very important in testimony to only talk about, to distill down to things that you know about and can speak clearly about, and not wander all over the place. That makes our case stronger if we ever have to go to court. Mark or Elliot, can you think of anything else that needs to be said about these species? Let me just mention one more thing. Let me just look at the Google Earth map again. Am I still sharing?
Yep. Yeah. And Emil, when you're done, can you leave that up?
I can leave this up, sure.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'm just trying to think if there's any other critical thing. It's very tricky, right? Because this road is illegal, right? And what has happened in the last few years is this pond has been created. And so the developer is saying, oh, this pond has harmed the bog turtles. So we're gonna get rid of the pond. We're gonna make the water level lower by opening up the culvert and getting rid of the beaver dam. And so the bog turtles are gonna be fine. Well, that's just pure speculation, right? They have no idea what these bog turtles are doing. The bog turtles may have already adjusted to this. The bog turtles may, depending on critical hibernation sites up here, where maybe they used to be down here, but now they've moved upstream to hibernate and do things, right, in the last 10 years. And then along comes the biological consultant with his speculative mitigation plan and drains this pond, and the water table drops where the bog turtles are hibernating and they freeze to death, right? Because they haven't studied them. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what the bog turtles are doing, and the consultants don't know what they're doing. And we have to be really strong on that point, right? That they have no data. They need to do 2 full years of intensive studies if they have any chance of knowing what these 3 species need.
Emil, could you copy and paste that blurb you showed us into the chat? Because I have no way of directly communicating with the attendee.
Oh, okay. I'll try to do that while the next person is speaking, and we'll see if it works.
Great. Thanks.
Anything else, Mark, directly about what I've spoken? You know, there are other things here. There are rare plants. There are forest issues. You know, we shouldn't be destroying intact forests. I want to stress when they blow apart this mountaintop and build on it, not only are they going to change the hydrology by changing the way that the water percolates into the ground, but they're also going to cause pollution, and that pollution is going to drain down into this wetland and degrade the habitat of these 3 species. So there's a water pollution issue that they can't avoid. You can't stick all those buildings and all those cars and all those people without causing water quality be degraded in this stream. And Elliot, you can tell me, is this a C1 stream?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Right. So that's a very important issue, and I'm sure Mark will elaborate on that. but I'll leave up the map. Mark, if you want, I can also go get the conservation blueprint, Matt, and put up the streams, and I can put up the Natural Heritage Priority Site. Okay.
The one thing I can add to what you said, Emil, is inherent in their mitigation approach means there's an impact. So the way the water quality management plan amendments work is you should not have impacts to environmentally sensitive areas. And once they say they're going to do mitigation, it means there's already an impact. So they already acknowledge the impacts and they think they can compensate for those impacts. But what Emil said is this is really just kind of a Band-Aid exercise because they have no idea where these species really are inhabiting. So just remember that. But the other thing that's important to acknowledge here is that when you look at this aerial photograph, this entire landscape has layer upon layer of environmental sensitivity. One, it's groundwater and your water supply. The wetlands that we're looking at in this area are considered EPA priority wetlands, and it's a formal designation. And in this case, they're designated as such because of the value of this system for water supply. Two, the Wallkill River is a Category 1 stream. And what the regulations that protect that stream designate it for is its ecological significance and its water quality. And inherent in the definition, it's considered an anti-degradation stream, which means you can't have any measurable change in the water quality. And we add on top of that, we have the Ogdensburg Fen Natural Heritage Priority Site, protected because of all the rare plants and the uniqueness of the system. And like Elliot said, its designation as, B1V1 is based on its global significance. So just what I said, there's 4 layers of sensitivity that all touch on different environmental aspects of this area. And then you add on what Emil said about the listed species, the federally listed bog turtle. And like Emil said, it has a really narrow habitat range. So even subtle changes could impact its habitat and therefore impact its population. The wood turtle, long-tailed salamander, and although not necessarily listed on site, there are other species that are in the area, like barred owl. So we have layer upon layer of environmental sensitivity. Now, one of the things that the applicant has stated in their submission for this water quality management plan amendment is that this ridge, this limestone ridge, provides absolutely no recharge right now. And looking at all their data, we found that there is a flaw. They based everything on one single aspect of this site, and it's the mapped soils from the soil survey. And it's a complex of rock outcrop and 2 other soils. And what the applicant's engineer said is none of those areas have the ability to recharge stormwater or precipitation, rainfall. But in their own report, they misidentified one of the soils. And that soil does provide recharge. So they have misled the Highlands Commission and the DEP. Now, they also said that their test pits support or corroborate the soil surveys. meaning that the soils are all very shallow to bedrock, within 39 inches. But what their test pits show, over half of the pits stayed excavated on the site from 2 different events are greater than 4 feet. And some of the test pits went down as much as 12.5 feet. Now, one of the things with recharge in limestone areas, it tends not to be uniform. And sinkholes or depressions or areas like they described that have sand and then bedrock at 12 feet, it fosters a condition called focused recharge, that the recharge doesn't occur everywhere, but it occurs in high amounts in isolated pockets or closed depressions. Now, the Highlands Commission, as well as New Jersey DEP, indicates that this ridge has a very high recharge rate. And what is it, Elliot, like 18 to 24 inches per year?
It's the highest that they rank recharge, whatever that is.
So what the applicant, what their engineer has said is that this ridge provides no recharge. Well, we know that can't be because there's springs and seeps along the base of this ridge. That water is coming from somewhere. And as Emil mentioned before, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, as part of their plan to protect bog turtle, has already asked the applicant to do a formal hydrologic study to look at the impacts that this project will have on recharge and on those springs and seeps that are so valuable to the habitat of bog turtle. And that has not been done. And this goes back to what Emil was talking about. Until they actually understand the impacts to this site, the New Jersey DEP should not be issuing this developer a water quality management plan amendment. So right now, we know in our comments, because of how the applicant misled the DEP, that they will have to change or at least readdress their stormwater management plan, as well as what they stated to the DEP already, since it was incorrect. There's one more thing. Oh, and Emil mentioned the illegal road. Now, part of the reason, even before the ponding, that the DEP never would have approved this road based on how the culvert was designed. And in their submission for their wetland permit, they actually referenced that they got a permit from DEP. And when we investigated the permit number that they indicated, it was a project somewhere in Union County, I think. Had nothing to do with this road. So as Emil said, we can find no evidence that this road ever obtained a permit. And based on when it was built, it would have been required to get a permit from either the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers or from the New Jersey DEP. So we believe that this road never had a permit and therefore is an illegal road. Now, in New Jersey regulations, they're not even allowed to maintain that road with a permit unless it was lawfully constructed or lawfully existing. And now they want to widen it and make it bigger. So our position is that they can't impact or they can't modify this road until it's legalized. And they would have to get a much more complicated permit, an individual wetland permit. And an important element of that permit is they would have to say that this project is in the public interest and there is no other alternative to accessing this site that would avoid wetlands. So it would be a very complicated process for them. But any information that anyone could provide to help us, or if you know more about the construction of this road, it would be very valuable to provide that in their comments, because we can find no evidence that this road ever obtained a permit. Elliot, anything else you want me to touch on?
Usually helps if I unmute when I try to speak. I think that did it. We can open it up to questions, or we have a few minutes. If you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll bring you into the discussion. I do have a question from Greg Gorman, who I am. Where'd you go, Greg? Greg, I think you have to re-raise your hand if you raised your hand. There we go.
Elliot, I just want to point out that I'm starting to put that paragraph in the chat, but I'm going to do it in pieces. It only takes a piece of it at a time.
Okay. Okay, here we go. Here's Greg. Greg, when you're ready, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, a couple years back, I sent a letter into DEP questioning the wetlands designation, the LOI. At that time, it was based on a LOI approved in 2016. And it had the wetlands designation basically along the sides of the pond that Emil showed. And my question was, with all the sensitive endangered species, and it's the only highlands or the largest mound in that area servicing the bog there, why there wasn't a transition zone designated on the map. And I just thought maybe somebody could answer that question.
I don't know the answer, Greg.
I can answer that one. They typically, at least a few years ago, they didn't have to show transition areas on a submission. They just would tell the applicant that your line is verified and what the width of the buffer is. Now for a submission, they have to show what they would expect the transition area to be. But in this case, the transition area is 150 feet. And the riparian zone off of the stream channel is 300 feet.
Did that answer your question, Greg?
Yeah, so it sounds like it's already included in there. It's just not shown. But when they made their determination as to where to build the structures and the holding pond, they would have accounted for that.
Yeah, and what they did in their plan, because they know if they were within the riparian zone or within the 150 feet, they would have problems with obtaining a water quality management plan amendment. So outside of the footprint of the new road, the development is outside of the 150-foot wetland buffer and the 300-foot riparian buffer.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have another question.
Elliot, all three, the entire blurb is now in the chat. I don't know how people can download that, or I don't know what they need to do to copy it down. I don't know how they can save it.
They have to copy and paste it as well.
Oh, okay, but they can just go into their chat and copy it. Okay.
Yep. And I think we have a friend of yours about to come in for a question. And Dawn is saying a screenshot works as well. We should be joined by Louise Chuck, if I, oh, momentarily.
Yeah, do I have to hit something here?
We can hear you.
No, we can hear you, Louise.
When I click the chat button, nothing comes up except the screen with all of you.
What? Really?
Yes.
And you do that right now?
I tried about 3 times just in the last, 3 to 4 minutes, and I could not get the chat. I clicked the button, but it would just throw me right back to the panelists.
That's weird.
Maybe somebody could send me what was in the chat afterwards.
Yep. You want to, I guess you can't, in the Q&A feature, why don't you leave your email address and I'll get it from there and send it to you.
All right, thank you.
You're
Louise, welcome. I'm so glad to hear your voice. I haven't spoken to you in so long.
I know, it's been years.
I've known Louise for 30 years. She's been fighting things. Louise, you still live in Monmouth County?
Yeah, and we're fighting Jared Kushner at this point on an application, but unfortunately, or fortunately, it's not nearly as critical as this one, but there are many of identical issues, including a Category 1 stream and removing at least 5 feet off the top of the site and 12 feet in other places.
Oh my God. And Louise, what group, tell everybody the group that you've always been associated with. Is it the League of Women Voters?
Yeah, the League of Women Voters, New Jersey, the Natural Resources Committee.
Right. Louise is my longtime friend, and she's one of the great battlers in the state of New Jersey. And so welcome, Louise, and everyone. Your heart should be warmed by hearing Louise's voice.
Does she eat bulldozers for breakfast, Emil?
Yeah, she's like Candy Ashman. Yeah, she eats bulldozers for breakfast.
Great to meet you, Louise. Do you have Emil's email address?
Yes, I do.
You can get that language directly from Emil.
Okay, very good. Emil, you can get an email from me. Thank you.
I'll send it right now if I still have your address. See what happens.
And I do have a couple more questions. Going to bring in former mayor of Franklin Borough, Dick Dorina. He should be joining us momentarily. Mr. Dorina. All right, Dick, as soon as you unmute, we could then hear you. Dick, you have to unmute yourself. Well, here we go.
Hello? Hello?
We can hear you now, Mr. Dorina. How are you?
I'm fine. First of all, let me thank you for working so hard to save our water. I'm just in awe at the experts. I really technically don't have much to say other than I'll be here for any questions that you gentlemen may have, because 35 years ago, when Franklin was drinking their water from the Franklin Pond, and I was mayor, and women would come up and show the white shirts of the brown water that we had to drink every time it rained. So In 1987, when I was on the planning board, a gentleman came by the name of Ed Nan in front of the planning board with a project for 70 acres of non-wet land, and he wanted to build Indian Ridge. There was a downturn in the economy, and the project was kind of put on hold by Ed Nan, but he promised the Board of Public Works and myself that he would sink a well for us. He borrowed the money and he sank the well. And in 1991, we were drinking water from that well. And Ed Nan was a gentleman, certainly kept up his word. And since then, that 35 years, it's been nothing but different owners and different people that want to do things on that project, lawsuits. We wouldn't even be here today because the planning board at Franklin couldn't really speak their minds what they thought of that. And if it wasn't for a lawsuit, there would be certainly not been no project. But anyway, I can remember my wife and I were both born here in Franklin 83 years ago. And, my wife can remember riding horses when that was a farm. And I can remember the day that I seen the barn burn down. It was just a farm. And as far as that road is concerned, Ed Nan used that road to get back. It wasn't a road at the time. And some people, I've questioned it. I've talked to Elliot about it, talked to the Board of Public Works foreman at the time, way back then. And the only time they were really down there was to move a tree from the dam that the beavers projected. And because of other areas, there was approved a strip mall before it was declared wetlands. And then when it was declared wetlands, sometimes in the early 90s, the whole project certainly changed. It went from an original 70 acres down to the 15 that we're looking at now. And as a member of the planning board and voting for that project back then, if I knew it was wetlands, it certainly would have never would have happened. Because we certainly, as for all these fine gentlemen that made great speeches, certainly, I don't know how the DEP can resist and not do their job for what you people are doing for us. So we really appreciate that. But I'll be here with Elliot. He's my general, as I call him. And I'm his private to do whatever they need and whatever you people need. I have deeds to those wells. And there was also a lawsuit that at that time I retired from Jersey Central Power Line Company. I was working out of town in Pittsburgh most of the time. So I lost about 10 years, but I did read up on everything that happened since I left Franklin as a mayor in 1995 or 96. And I filled that gap in by going up and reading information on the planning board and also the Board of Public Works. And to this date, I don't think they even have talked to the Board of Public Works or any officials in Franklin about this project, what water would be available and so forth and so on. When I first sat in the first meeting for this project back in, I think it was about 2017. And when the lawyer got up and said this, and I'll quote his words, my client paid $10 million for this piece of property and he's serious about developing it. And I said to my wife, I said, I have a property in Arizona, oceanfront piece of property. I wonder if he would buy it. He bought himself nothing but a headache and he knew it. So thank God that you people are here to make this whole project right. And I will do whatever is in my power to help you people do your job. And I tell you, I am so thankful for you. God bless you.
All right. Thank you, Dick. Keep up the good work and we'll be in touch.
Hey, Elliot,
Yeah,
can I ask Dick a question?
sure.
Mr. Dorino, were you mayor or on the town council when that road was built?
Yes, I was. I was the mayor.
So do you know if the developer ever got a permit for that road?
There is something in a deed that I talked to Elliot about that they made projects to the U.S. Corps of Engineers. But that's just in a deed. I don't think there was any proof of it. Nobody came before me as the mayor or the Board of Public Works or the Planning Board with that. That's just so stated that in a deed that I have because of a lawsuit that they projected, I think in 2006, when the planning board, which I was no longer on, or at that time I wasn't involved in the town that much. In 2006, there was a lawsuit when the planning board changed the zoning on that from multiple to R1 zone. In other words, single family homes only. And then the owner was, I think, Lynn Associates, which Ednan was still hooked to. They took the borough to court, and they made a decision. The judge did that the borough was in error, and that the developer had to the right to develop that as it was originally for 250 homes, which was based on, at that time, if you figure out the 70 acres, and sitting on a planning board, we always like to do things 4 units to an acre, gives everybody basically a 200-foot front or 100-foot front, 100 by 100. And that's where we came up with that number that Ednan would have the right to build a combination of condos and townhouses on 70 acres of dry land, because at that time it was not deemed wetlands. So Ednan used that road just to get back there to put the well in, one well. And we have information, and Elliot has that from the recent project that the town did to examine that whole site and what it's capable of producing as far as the water is concerned. And then the road just became an area where our Board of Public Works would go back and check the wells and work on the wells, but we never did, other than remove that. One of the members of the Board of Public Works told me he had to go back and remove the branch from the cul-de-sac. But I think that thing was never designed, never approved. Like I think Mark said that the culvert wasn't illegal. Well, the whole road was probably not corrected. And with, I talked to several residents that used to hunt on that, and they said there was a trail back there somewhere, but they really don't know. And I think Dawn Rowe probably knows more about that site, you know, than we do. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm curious, Elliot, do you have that deed that mentions the Army Corps?
Not yet. Dick just told me about that earlier today, and he's going to get us a copy.
And you know, and Dick, what was the date on the deed? Do you remember?
2006, I believe. If you just want to wait, I have it. my secretary's in the other room with our 4-year-old collie puppy. He doesn't want to come and get his picture taken.
So, Elliot, just remember, the Army Corps
Here, I have it right here.
transferred its jurisdiction in '88. So that permit, if it was from the Army, would have been before the Freshwater Wetlands Protection Act.
Right.
And it would have had to have been an individual permit that required mitigation.
So there would have been evidence of it?
Well, that's, I mean, it would have been a complicated permit, even at that time. And that's part of the reason that I doubt that it was given, because they would have had to provide, satisfy the presumption that there could be a non-wetland alternative to get to the site.
Right, and Mr. Mann just did this as a favor. He probably would not have invested the money required for an individual permit.
Yes, yeah. He did. He did us a favor.
Yeah, it makes sense. All right.
Okay. I have in front of me, it's a declaration of easement. Okay. And this has a book and page on it. And it was, I think, in the county clerk's office on 7th month of the 24th day of year 2009. It's a dedication of easement. And it, I won't be able to find it. I don't want to hold everybody up, but I will give Elliot a copy of this as soon as we make contact. But
is this an access easement for the wells?
Yes. But that was also based on a 350 foot wellhead protection of the 2 wells that we have, 3 wells now. So we have a 350 foot easement on that. And here, whereas, here we go, geez, when I'm talking, let me read this. With the whereas of in 1989, Lynn had some construction activities in the property, including filling of the wetlands in accordance with the U.S. Army engineers permit, preliminary grading and construction of the possible water system included an access and a culvert crossing serving the property.
But they don't reference a permit number.
No.
So that could have been just extemporaneous.
That could have been just a statement. As someone used earlier, misled. And that was very kind of, I think, Mr. DeVito that used that word misled a few times, because I downright tell them that they're just not truthful. Fine line between being misled and lied to. Excuse me for that, but I had to say it.
That's okay.
All right. So thank you, Dick. We'll get me a copy of that either directly or through Ian would be great. Does anyone else have any questions? I'll wait a moment or so. I do have a question from a phone call.
Elliot, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Dick.
Well, I had a problem too, because I had to push the screen down and see my choices of auto, because I was trying to raise my hand and you couldn't see me, because I see up now, it says, when I pull it down from the top of the screen, it says either mute, questioner, and I think the other people is not seeing those commands, how they can get to you.
Well, all right. Well, we have a caller in. She has the person at last four digits 2087 just has to unmute themselves and we can talk. And Dick, I'm going to make you back to an attendee. Thanks. So 2087, please unmute yourself and you can ask your question. There we go. Up, you just remuted, you unmuted yourself. You're good now.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I have an article here. It was June 18th, but I don't know what year, but I think it has to be since 2017, where they made the bog turtle, the New Jersey's official reptile, and it was signed by Governor Murphy. And he said that once abundant in New Jersey, this secretive palm-sized turtle today is found only in rural areas such as Sussex, Warren, Hunterdon, and Salem counties. The bog turtles have very specific habitat needs and are very sensitive to changes to its environment. The DEP has been working to protect land around high priority populations, restoring habitat by eliminating invasive plant species and identifying critical movement corridors.
Unfortunately, they don't say preventing inappropriate development.
Okay, I just wanted to throw that in there. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can find all sorts of wonderful statements by the DP about all the wonderful things that they protect, except that the land use regulation program is really good at handing out permits like lollipops and ignoring all the regulations.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you all for attending. Hope to see you all on May 6th, 10 a.m. Please, please remember you have to contact DEP in order to testify on May 6th, and please submit written comments. Thank you, Dawn, and thank you all. We'll call it a night. This has been recorded. I plan to put it on the New Jersey Highlands Coalition's YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, search New Jersey Highlands Coalition, bring you to our channel, and you'll be able to see tonight's recording. If you need to remember something or you have some friend or colleague who'd like to see it. Thank you very much, and we'll see you. Bye.